past the 66th parallel, the familiar rules of the world quietly stop applying. What most people picture when they hear the word Arctic is a barren, wind-swept expanse of white, silent, hostile, and essentially empty. That picture is wrong in almost every detail. What actually exists up here is one of the most dynamic, layered, and consequential environments this planet has ever produced. And if you stay with this journey, you'll encounter a version of the Arctic that the vast majority of people never get anywhere close to seeing. Not the postcard version, not the crisis headline version, the real one, complicated, alive, and far stranger than either of those portrayals suggests. The Arctic Circle is a line of latitude drawn around Earth at roughly 66 degrees and 33 minutes north. Cross it, and ordinary expectations about how the world works begin to dissolve one by one. The sun vanishes for months at a stretch, then later refuses to set for just as long. Certain towns sit in unbroken darkness for more than 60 consecutive days every winter, then spend their entire summers under light that simply never dims, never fades, never gives way to night. Every organism here, from microscopic life pushing upward through frozen ground to apex predators crossing miles of open ice without a landmark in sight, is calibrated precisely to that cycle. Months of darkness, then months of relentless light, with almost nothing in between. It sounds extreme because it is. But life here didn't simply tolerate those extremes. It organized itself entirely around them in ways that took millions of years to refine, and that we are only beginning to properly understand. What catches most people off guard the first time they seriously engage with this place is just how much is constantly happening beneath all that apparent stillness. The surface looks frozen and static. It isn't. Sea ice expands and pulls back with every passing season in a rhythm that resembles something biological, something breathing in and out on a continental scale. At its greatest annual extent, that ice stretches across roughly 5.4 million square miles of ocean surface, blanketing a region larger than the entire continental United States. Then the sun climbs back into the sky, temperatures shift, and the whole system contracts again. it has been cycling like this for longer than human civilization has existed. The question scientists are now asking with increasing urgency is whether it will keep doing so at the same scale for much longer, because the data coming in suggests the answer may be no. The Arctic itself has no land mass at its center. This surprises people who assume it mirrors Antarctica in structure. It doesn't. The Arctic is an ocean, deep in places, largely uncharted even now, and completely encircled by the northern coastlines of 8 countries: Norway, Sweden, Finland, Iceland, Russia, Greenland, Canada, and the United States by way of Alaska. Those nations share a boundary drawn not on land, but across frozen water. And the geopolitics of that arrangement grow more complicated with every year of warming. Beneath that frozen seafloor sit some of the most substantial, untapped fossil fuel reserves anywhere on the planet. Whether extracting any of them is worth what it would cost this region, and by extension, the billions of people who depend on the Arctic's stability without knowing it, is a question that gets considerably harder to dismiss the more time you spend understanding what this place actually does for the rest of the world. Because nothing that happens here stays contained. The Arctic doesn't operate in isolation from the global climate system. It actively drives significant portions of it. Melt enough ice in the right places, and ocean circulation patterns shift thousands of miles away. Rainfall across sub-Saharan Africa becomes less predictable. Agricultural growing seasons in parts of Asia are disrupted in ways that affect food supply chains on the other side of the planet. Winter storm systems hitting the eastern United States and northern Europe intensify beyond what the infrastructure was built to handle. The Arctic functions as something like a planetary thermostat, a regulating mechanism that absorbs excess heat and redistributes energy across the northern hemisphere in ways that billions of people depend on without ever pausing to consider it. The concern isn't simply that this thermostat is running warm. It's that it has been doing so at a rate roughly 4 times faster than the global average. And the downstream consequences are compounding in ways that weren't fully anticipated even a single generation ago. The most visible consequence on the ground, or rather beneath it, is what's happening to permafrost. Permafrost is ground that has remained continuously frozen for anywhere from hundreds to hundreds of thousands of years. Across the Arctic, it underlies roughly a quarter of the Northern Hemisphere's total land surface. As temperatures rise, that ground is thawing. And as it thaws, it releases methane, a greenhouse gas significantly more potent than carbon dioxide over short time scales, that has been sealed underground since the last ice age. This creates a feedback loop that climate models have struggled to fully account for. Warming thaws. Permafrost. Thawing permafrost releases methane. Methane accelerates warming, which thaws more permafrost. There is no natural break built into that cycle at the temperatures currently being recorded across the region. Few places on Earth produce a first impression quite like the Lofoten Islands. Granite peaks rise almost vertically above the water, their edges sharp and angular in ways that seem more architectural than geological, while clusters of red and yellow fishing cabins sit quietly at the base of those cliffs, completely indifferent to how dramatic their surroundings are. The combination shouldn't work as well as it does. It does. What makes Lofoten genuinely surprising is that despite sitting well above the Arctic Circle, the islands stay remarkably mild throughout the year, kept that way by warm ocean currents that originate in the Gulf of Mexico and push northward along the Norwegian coast without losing enough heat to leave the archipelago at the mercy of true Arctic cold. In winter, the sun grazes the southern horizon and spreads gold and deep blue across the mountain faces for just a few hours before disappearing again. In summer, it doesn't set at all. And under that permanent amber light, the islands seem to exist in a different relationship with time than anywhere else. Beneath the scenery, though, runs something older than any tourism industry. For more than 1,000 years, these waters have produced some of the most consistently prized cod in the world, air-dried on wooden racks in the cold Arctic wind until the flesh reaches a concentration of flavor and protein that made it valuable across Northern Europe long before refrigeration existed. Just north along the coast, the landscape intensifies into something even harder to believe. Senja is an island that people who know Norway well tend to describe as the country condensed into a single location. Fjords, quiet fishing communities, dramatic mountain ridges. and exposed coastal cliffs, all compressed together within an area small enough to drive across in a couple of hours. What separates it from the rest of the Norwegian coast is the specific character of its peaks. They don't build gradually from the shoreline. They erupt from the water almost vertically, shaped over roughly 10,000 years by glaciers that carved through the underlying rock with a force that left almost no gentle angles anywhere. The mountain known as Segla has become the island's most recognized image. A single narrow blade of rock climbing more than 2,100 feet directly above the ocean. Its profile identifiable from miles away in every direction. In winter, orcas move through the fjords at the base of those cliffs, while the northern lights shift across the sky above them, producing scenes so precisely composed they appear staged. Senja doesn't announce itself loudly. It simply exists and lets the landscape make whatever argument. Further north along the Norwegian coast, Tromsø completely reframes what a functioning city above the Arctic Circle looks like. Sitting more than 220 miles north of the circle itself, it's a place where you can drink coffee in a warm cafe while watching the aurora move across the glass of the window in front of you, or board a small vessel into complete polar darkness and still return to restaurants, bookshops, and a university that has been operating since the 19th century. For centuries, Tromsø served as the primary staging ground for polar exploration. Roald Amundsen prepared and departed from here before multiple expeditions toward the poles. Today, the city hosts some of the world's most sophisticated aurora research, partly because the local geomagnetic conditions make the lights visible on an almost nightly basis during the winter months, and partly because the infrastructure for sustained scientific work has been accumulating here for well over 100 years. What researchers studying the human side of Arctic life have found equally interesting is the psychological texture of living through months without sunlight. Past Tromsø, following the Norwegian coastline to its northernmost accessible extreme. The cliff face of Nordkapp rises just over 1,000 feet above the Barents Sea. It has been regarded as the northern edge of the European continent since the English explorer Richard Chancellor sighted it in 1553 while attempting to find a northeastern sea route to Asia. A voyage that failed in its primary objective and succeeded in producing one of the most enduring landmarks in European geographical imagination. Technically, a small nearby peninsula called Knivskjellodden extends slightly further north, but Nordkapp claimed the title first in the historical record and has never relinquished it despite the cartographic argument against it. Every summer, travelers make the journey to stand on that cliff and watch the midnight sun complete a full O above the horizon without ever touching it. In winter, the same cliff sits in near total darkness, illuminated only by whatever the aurora decides to offer on any given night. Nordkapp has always represented something beyond its coordinates, the distinctly human compulsion to reach the outermost edge of something, even when there is nothing beyond that edge but open ocean and the slow drift of polar ice. That open ocean leads eventually to Svalbard, an archipelago positioned roughly halfway between the Norwegian mainland and the North Pole, where the statistic about polar bears outnumbering people is not a dramatic exaggeration. It is simply accurate. The main settlement, Longyearbyen, ranks among the most northernmost permanent human communities on Earth. Buildings throughout the town stand on metal stilts driven into the ground rather than conventional foundations, because any heat transferred directly to the permafrost beneath would cause it to thaw unevenly and destabilize whatever is built on top of it. From November through January, the sun does not rise at all. From late April through late August, it does not set. Beneath one of the mountains surrounding the town, accessible by a long tunnel driven into the frozen hillside, sits the Global Seed Vault, a facility containing over 1.2 million individual seed samples, representing plant varieties from virtually every country on Earth. It was designed as a biological insurance policy, maintained by the passive cold of the permafrost, rather than by active refrigeration systems that would require continuous power. Outside the vault, glaciers push slowly toward the sea. Blue ice caves form in their interiors, where meltwater has carved channels through the frozen mass, and Arctic foxes move across terrain so uniformly white that their winter coats render them effectively invisible. back on the Scandinavian mainland and across the border into Sweden. Kiruna presents one of the stranger situations in contemporary urban planning. It's Sweden's northernmost city, built around an iron ore deposit that turned out to be among the largest ever discovered. And the underground mining operation that has extracted material from beneath it for over a century has now removed so much rock that the ground above is subsiding. Rather than abandon the city's infrastructure, authorities made the decision to relocate Kiruna approximately 2 miles to the east, moving buildings one by one over a period of decades in what has become one of the most ambitious and logistically complicated urban relocation projects in modern history. The process is still ongoing. Outside the city limits, the landscape returns immediately to something that feels entirely untouched. Frozen lakes reflecting the sky, open tundra stretching to the horizon, and reindeer trails crossing the snow in patterns that have been used for thousands of years by the Sami people who have managed this land across all of recorded history and considerably before it. Not far from Kiruna, beside the Torne River, something exists that genuinely shouldn't be possible in any practical sense. The Icehotel at Jukkasjärvi has been built from scratch every single winter since 1989, assembled each season from approximately 5,500 tons of river ice and 33,000 tons of compacted snow. International artists are commissioned to design individual rooms, which means no 2 editions of the hotel are identical, and no room within any edition looks like any other. The bar serves drinks in glasses carved from the same river ice that forms the surrounding walls. Every spring, without fail, the entire structure returns to the river it came from. A year-round version of the hotel now operates alongside the seasonal one, kept frozen by solar power, an application of renewable energy that manages to be both practically sensible and quietly poetic in this particular context. East toward the Norwegian border, Abisko National Park sits roughly 155 miles above the Arctic Circle in a landscape of frozen waterfalls, deep river valleys, and the vast expanse of Lake Tornatrask stretching away toward distant mountains. The park has become internationally known among aurora watchers for a specific atmospheric phenomenon. The surrounding mountain ranges create a localized zone of clear sky directly above the park that persists even when cloud cover blankets the rest of the region. Aurora researchers refer to it as the blue hole, and it makes Abisko one of the most statistically consistent places on the planet for seeing the lights on any given winter night. The park also marks the beginning of the Kungsleden, the King's Trail, a long-distance hiking route extending 270 miles through some of the most remote Arctic wilderness accessible by trail in Scandinavia. The cultural and geographic region of Lapland extends outward from that wilderness across 4 national borders, covering roughly 155,000 square miles, with a total population of fewer than 200,000 people, a density so low it's almost abstract. The Sami have lived across this entire territory for over 10,000 years, predating every national boundary that now divides it. Their relationship with reindeer is not simply a cultural tradition in the way that term is often used. It is a complete system of land management, seasonal migration, and ecological knowledge built up over millennia. Protected by law in each of the 4 countries the territory spans, and still actively practiced by Sami communities today, despite every pressure that modernity has placed on it. Right on the Arctic Circle, at exactly 66 degrees 33 minutes north, Rovaniemi serves as Finland's northernmost city and the officially designated home of Santa Claus, a status that generates enough international tourism to sustain a dedicated international airport and a hospitality industry built almost entirely around a single winter season. The underlying history of the city is considerably less festive. During the final weeks of World War II, retreating German forces destroyed Rovaniemi almost completely, leaving very little of the previous settlement standing. The reconstruction that followed was designed by Finnish architect Alvar Aalto, who laid out the new city in the rough shape of a reindeer's head when viewed from above, an act of symbolic optimism embedded directly and permanently into the urban geography. The Arcticum Museum, housed in a striking building, partially submerged in the ground, documents both Arctic science and Sami cultural history in ways that anchor the city's identity to something more substantial than seasonal mythology. Deeper into Finnish Lapland, the highland plateau of Saariselkä opens into one of the quietest landscapes in Northern Europe. Open fells, frozen lake surfaces, catching the light at angles that shift constantly, and wilderness that extends without interruption in every direction. The bedrock beneath it belongs to the Scandinavian Shield, one of the oldest geological formations exposed anywhere on Earth, with sections dating back more than 2.5 billion years. Adjacent to Saariselkä, Urho Kekkonen National Park protects nearly 1,000 square miles of this ancient terrain, making it one of the largest protected wilderness areas in Europe. Archaeological excavations within the park have uncovered Stone Age settlements over 6,000 years old, confirming that humans have not merely visited this climate, but have built sustained ways of life within it across a time span that dwarfs the entire history of most civilizations. Crossing into Russian territory, the Khibiny Mountains rise from the Kola Peninsula to peaks of around 3,900 feet. Modest in height, extraordinary in age. They formed approximately 400 million years ago, placing them among the oldest mountain ranges on the planet and predating the Ural Mountains by a significant margin. The geology here is unlike almost anywhere else on Earth, containing over 500 distinct mineral types in a concentration that has attracted scientific attention since the early 20th century and continues to yield discoveries. Down on the Barents Sea coast, more than 75 miles northeast of Murmansk. The fishing village of Teriberka spent the decades following the Soviet collapse effectively emptying out, buildings going dark, boats settling permanently into the shoreline, the infrastructure of a working community dissolving slowly into the Arctic wind. A film shot there in 2014 changed its trajectory almost overnight, drawing visitors who came for the desolate scenery and found something more complicated, a place in the process of deciding whether to remember what it was or become something new. Small guest houses opened. Aurora tours began running. Whales pass offshore when the water is open. The honest answer is that both things are true at once. Teriberka is being rebuilt, and it remains, in important ways, a ruin. That combination is precisely what draws people to it. Out in the North Atlantic, the small island of Grímsey sits 25 miles off Iceland's northern coast and represents the only point where Iceland actually crosses the Arctic Circle. Its permanent population of roughly 60 people shares the island each summer, with millions of seabirds that nest on cliff faces, dropping nearly 330 feet to the ocean below. A stone sphere on the island marks the circle's location, and it is repositioned periodically as Earth's axial tilt shifts the line's precise position over time. From those same cliffs, Arctic terns will launch within weeks of the breeding season into a migration that will take them to the edge of Antarctica before the year is out. Ilulissat, Greenland. On Greenland's west coast, Ilulissat confronts visitors with ice on a scale that recalibrates the imagination. The Kujalek glacier advances at roughly 130 feet per day, among the fastest glacier flows ever measured, and calves icebergs large enough to extend 330 feet above the waterline before they drift out into the North Atlantic. This single glacier produces approximately 10% of all icebergs entering North Atlantic shipping lanes each year. Glaciologists study it specifically because its rate of change provides some of the most direct available evidence for projecting future sea level rise at a global scale. Standing on the cliffs above the fjord, you hear the ice before you fully register what you're hearing. A low groan, then a crack like distant thunder, then silence again. Greenland's capital, Nuuk, sits just below the Arctic Circle on the country's southwest coast, home to roughly a third of Greenland's entire population, in a city that feels more like a frontier outpost than a capital in any conventional sense. It balances Inuit cultural traditions and the administrative responsibilities of self-governance within the Kingdom of Denmark in ways that are still being actively negotiated. The National Museum preserves mummified remains recovered from the permafrost, some more than 500 years old and still largely intact. Direct physical evidence of Arctic life long before European contact fundamentally altered the region's trajectory. On the opposite side of the Arctic, along the western shore of Hudson Bay in Canada, Churchill has organized its entire identity around a seasonal wildlife event that occurs nowhere else on Earth at comparable scale. As the bay begins to freeze in late October, hundreds of polar bears converge on the coastline, waiting for ice thick enough to support hunting. The town sits roughly 620 miles north of Winnipeg and counts fewer than 1,000 permanent residents, yet draws visitors from every continent during a 6-week window each autumn. In summer, the Churchill River fills with thousands of beluga whales. Migratory birds nest across the surrounding tundra in numbers that make the landscape appear to be moving. The northern lights appear above radar installations built during the Cold War, and now repurposed for atmospheric research. Churchill exists at the intersection of wildlife spectacle, indigenous history, and climate science in a way that few places anywhere manage, without one of those elements overwhelming the others. From the storm-shaped islands off the Norwegian coast to the frozen margins of Hudson Bay, the Arctic Circle is less a line on a map than a threshold between the world as most people understand it and a version of the world that operates according to rules most people have never had cause to learn. Cold here is not the absence of life. Isolation is not the absence of meaning or history or human depth. The ice that makes this region appear forbidding from the outside is the same ice that has regulated the climate for billions of people who will spend their entire lives without coming within 1,000 miles of it.